dolls, and welcome back to Vlogmas Day 30. Welcome to part 2 of my music series. Today we're going to talk about arguably the most famous figure of the 1960s, Twiggy. She was everywhere in the 1960s. She was a model, a muse, an artist, a designer, and in the end, I feel like when people don't know a lot about the 60s, they do know about Twiggy. When you think about the 60s, the first face that comes to mind is Twiggy. And so I feel like there's this name, a lot of people know her and know her face, but not that many know her story. And the most surprising thing about her story is that Twiggy really only modeled for 4 years. Yet during this time, she became the face of an entire generation. So get yourself a drink, get comfortable, and let me take you back to London in the 60s, when a young girl named Lesley became an icon called Twiggy. Of course, there's another giveaway today. Let's just say the tools to create this eye makeup. So stay until the end of the video to find out how you can enter. There once was a girl with eyes too big for her face and lashes thick enough to cast shadows. They called her the face of 66, a phenomenon, a fluke, a fad. But the truth is, she was a mirror, and the world was finally ready to see itself differently. Before she was Twiggy, she was just Lesley, a young girl from Neasden with homemade dresses, wide eyes, and a gaze that hadn't yet found its place. She wasn't a typical beauty, not a star in the making, just a still face in a hair salon window, until someone stopped and looked a little closer. But what happened next wasn't planned, it wasn't chased, but it changed everything and made one girl the face of an entire generation. Chapter 1. The Doll, the Drawn Eyes, and the Girl from Neasden. Twiggy was born September 19, 1949, in Neasden, a suburban of northwest London that was more a bus route than a destination. The streets were lined with modest brick terraces, and the air often smelled faintly of coal smoke and cooked cabbage. It was a place of ration books, post-war rebuilding, and quiet resilience. Hardly the origin one would imagine for the girl whose face became the most recognizable of the decade. Her full name was Lesley Hornby, though almost no one would know her as that. She was the youngest of 3 daughters, separated from her older sisters by more than a decade. Twiggy grew up with her 2 older sisters and her father Norman and her mother Nell, who worked part-time at a factory. Twiggy would later speak carefully about her mother's depression, describing her childhood as, quote, very protected, really, as if the weight of the world had been gently held back from her by older hands. The house was small, neat, full of patterned wallpaper and the rustle of women's voices. It was not a fashionable household, they couldn't afford that, but it was a household where clothes mattered. Nell taught Lesley how to sew at a young age. By 12, she was cutting and stitching her own dresses, unpicking old hems, saving scraps of fabrics, turning nothing into something. The clothes she made weren't elegant or expensive, but they were hers. She'd make short shifts with bold collars and contrasted cuffs, experimenting with new styles long before boutiques caught up. After I read that description about the clothes she made, I decided to go with this dress. This is a replica by the Belated Beatnik. I adore it. I'm gonna have her linked down below. And I do have a code if you want to save 10% on your order. But look at this. This is perfect, and it is so Twiggy. At Neasden's secondary modern, Lesley was known for 2 things, being tiny and being imaginative. Her classmates called her Twigs because of her thin limbs, a nickname that clung like lint and would later become legend. She was clever, though not academic, and her teachers described her as sweet-natured but shy. She loved music, especially the Beatles, and she'd sneak records into her bedroom and sketch outfits on lined paper while the needle ran over the grooves. Her heroes weren't actresses, they were models, especially one, Jean Shrimpton. I had pictures of her all over my bedroom wall, Twiggy recalled. Jean's minimalist beauty, bar lashes, clean lines, no frill clothes was everything to Lesley. She studied Jean's face like a map, trying to figure out how someone could look so powerful and so effortless at the same time. And quietly in her bedroom mirror, she began to experiment. She discovered makeup with the kind of devotion that some girls save for novels. She would use her pocket money to buy the cheapest false lashes from Woolworth, plus liquid liner and white eye pencils. Her routine, even at 15 years, was already iconic. Quote, "It took me an hour and a half to do my eyes," she later said. "I had 3 pairs of false eyelashes on top. I'm amazed I could open my eyes." But the lashes were just part of it. She painted on the illusion of doll-like lower lashes with careful flicks, traced her upper lids in the thick black swoops, and layered white kohl along the rim of her eyes to make them look wider, brighter, and more curious. Her hair was still long and natural then, worn with a center part or pinned back with a slide, but the transformation was already happening. The girl from Neasden was becoming someone else. She wasn't copying anyone in particular, not really, not even Jean. She was chasing a kind of image she hadn't seen yet, something between a child, a ragdoll, and a rock star. And while her parents assumed she was playing around with makeup like most teenage girls, Twiggy was quietly building a mask that would change everything. A look, a signature, a face the world hadn't seen yet. Chapter 2. The Cut, the Cart, and the Girl in the Window. It was January of 1966. London was still grey at the edges, but something was shifting in its middle. You could feel it in the Carnaby Street's window displays, in the swagger of teenagers who didn't care for rules, in the way girls were starting to wear skirts that made older women gasp. Lesley Hornby was 16, skinny as ever, still taking the bus from Neasden and still sewing her own dresses. She wasn't thinking about fashion history, she just wanted a trim. The salon was Leonard of Mayfair, a temple of hairdressing in London, run by Leonard Lewis, Beatle Sassoon's protégé. She went in there for a regular appointment with her boyfriend, a smooth-talking older hairdresser named Nigel Davis. But he had a plan, or at least a strong instinct. Nigel, who would soon rename himself Justin de Villeneuve, believed Lesley had something that other girls hadn't. And he convinced Leonard to use her as a hair model for a new kind of chop, one that was boyish, sharp with geometric edges that framed her face like a mod helmet. It took 7 hours to get the color right. Her mousy brown dyed into streaky blonde panels, the shape razor cut and fussed over until it looked accidental. While they worked, photographer Barry Latkin snapped a few test shots in the corner of the salon. Lesley, now almost entirely Twiggy, posed in front of a plain wall, chin down, eyes up, expression blank but not vacant. The result didn't look like a pretty girl, it looked like a prototype. Leonard pinned one of the portraits in his salon window, more out of pride than expectation. It hung beside photos of magazine editorials and celebrity clients. No one thought much of it until Deidre McSherry, a fashion editor at the Daily Express, walked past one day and stopped cold. She stepped into the salon and asked who the girl was. Barry gave her Twiggy's name. Deidre asked if she could write a piece. The paper sent a reporter to Twiggy, who was still living at home, and was so shocked that she ran upstairs to her father and said, quote, "Dad, they're going to put me in the newspaper." The piece came out with the headline, Twiggy, the Face of 66. Just like that, a nickname, a year, and a prediction that would turn out to be exactly right. Twiggy later said, quote, "I didn't even know what the word model meant. She thought it sounded like something other girls did. Tall girls, glossy girls, girls with cheekbones and confidence. She was 5'6", had no curves, no experience, and a wardrobe made mostly from her own sewing machine. But somehow the world saw in her what she hadn't seen in herself. The calls started coming, test shoots, booking requests, magazine pullouts. Within weeks, she was all over London. Within months, she was being flown to Paris, New York, Milan. People used the word phenomenon. Designers asked for her by name. By spring of 1966, she was earning £80 an hour, more than her father made in an entire month. All that while, Twiggy remained oddly detached from the frenzy. Quote, "I thought everyone had gone mad," she said. She didn't try to be cool. She just stood in front of the camera and let her stillness speak. Wide eyes, pale lips, long limbs folded into impossible positions. She didn't know how to pose, which made her perfect. In an era that was rejecting that polished, theatrical glamour of the 1950s, Twiggy's blankness felt honest. She didn't seduce, she stared. She was the opposite of effort, and that was what made her iconic. Justin de Villeneuve, now her full-time manager, controlled her bookings and image. He was ambitious, restless, slightly ridiculous. He even told everyone she was 5'8" when she truly wasn't. But their relationship wasn't just professional. They began dating when Twiggy was around 16 and he was roughly 10 years older. Their romantic and professional relationships overlapped. Justin acted as her manager, publicist, and self-styled image architect during her rise of fame in the mid to late 1960s. He helped coordinate her press appearances, bookings, and branding, often taking significant public credit for her success. Twiggy has since spoken with some distance and nuance about that period in her life. In later interviews, she acknowledged the power imbalance, noting that while he was instrumental in managing her early career, she eventually outgrew both the relationship and his control. In her own words, quote, "He didn't discover me. We were just going out and he saw an opportunity." Still, the two of them became a team. Him with the voice, her with the face. They rented a small flat in London and lived like kids caught in the middle of a fashion revolution. I feel like this is gonna be something that'll come up more and more in these stories, that some of these women had at a very young age partners that were significantly older. Like, I'm 26 now and I cannot believe being with someone who's 16 because that feels like a lifetime away. And I just want to say that, of course, this wasn't right. I am not approving of this in any sense or way. She has spoken out about how wrong it was. No one was charged because I believe the age of consent in the UK is 16. But I do feel bad for her, and I do wonder whether she would have gotten out of that relationship earlier if he wouldn't have been her manager, because he controlled her life significantly during the late 60s. By 17, she was on the cover of every major magazine in Britain. By 18, she was on the cover of Vogue in the US and France and Japan. At 19, she had her own line of clothing, her own Barbie doll, and a fan club with thousands of members. Every girl wanted her look, every photographer wanted her face, and every headline had her name in it, or at least the 6 letters that defined her: Twiggy. It hadn't taken years of training, or runways, or rejection. It had taken a haircut, a boyfriend with a plan, and a photograph in a window. Chapter 3. The Girl in the Window Goes Global. It was March of 1967 when a plane touched down in New York City. She was 18 and had never been outside of Europe. New York was loud in a way that London wasn't. Sirens seemed louder, buildings seemed taller, and people didn't look twice, but they did look at her. When Twiggy stepped off the plane, she was met by hysteria. Flashbulbs popped, fans screamed, reporters shouted her name across the tarmac. It felt absurd. Quote, "I remember getting off the plane and thinking, why are all these people here?" she later said. "I didn't think they were here for me." But they were. In Britain, she had been famous. In America, she was about to become something stranger, a phenomenon. Life, Time, Newsweek, they all ran features on the Twiggy sensation. Andy Warhol called her a total genius. Diana Freeland anointed her the future of fashion. The New York Times called her the most famous teenager in the world. And she hadn't even finished learning how to pose. What made Twiggy different wasn't just her body, though that helped. In an era still coming down from the hourglass ideal of the 1950s, Twiggy was a different species altogether. She didn't fill out clothes, she disappeared inside them. A shift dress didn't hug her, it hung on her like paper. She wasn't a woman playing a girl, with no intention of growing into anyone else. And then there were the eyes, those eyes. She made mascara an act of rebellion. Her lashes, 3 layers glued on top, painted on the bottom, curled and coaxed and black as ink, became shorthand for a whole decade. People started calling it Twiggy makeup. She looked like a cartoon and a porcelain doll and an alien all at once. But mostly, she looked like the future. While in Britain, she was booked for a cover shoot with American Vogue, photographed by Richard Avedon. She didn't say much, she never did, but Richard was enchanted. Quote, "She had no artifice," he said. She didn't try to charm the camera, she just let it look at her. Back in London, Mary Quant was already calling her the miniskirt ambassador, and she really was. While Twiggy didn't invent the miniskirt, she made it look like it had always existed. She made it feel unarguable. Bare knees, flat shoes, no stocking. It wasn't just a look, it was a shrug at the past. Girls across Britain cut their hair, shortened their hemlines, stopped pretending to be older than they were. Suddenly, teenage girls didn't have to act like women to be taken seriously. They could be themselves, gawky, toothy, angular, strange, and still be seen. The fashion and the beauty ideal changed significantly from the 50s to the 60s. If you look at the 50s, the epitome of beauty was someone like Marilyn Monroe, with curves, with a definitely very feminine, very womanly look. And now in the 60s, a lot of these angular girls were super popular. Jean Shrimpton, Twiggy, they were all really, really thin. Twiggy has spoken about the fact that she was severely underweight back then. And it's just interesting to see how fashion and beauty ideals can go from one extreme to another in such a short time frame. But if the world was obsessed with Twiggy, Twiggy was less interested. Quote, "I was never into fashion," she said later. "I liked clothes, I liked putting things together, but I didn't dream about runaways or designers. It just happened to me." She called her career a fluke, while everybody else called it a revolution. In private, fame unnerved her. She still lived with her parents when she wasn't working, still made tea in the kitchen like any ordinary girl. When she returned from America that very spring, her mom had kept a scrapbook of clippings and taped a letter to the fridge that said, "Twiggy, front cover of Newsweek." Her dad just asked how the flights were. Still, the schedule was punishing. Sometimes 4 shoots a day, back to back, constant flights, endless fittings, interviewers asking the same questions in 5 different languages. Justin managed everything, negotiated rates, picked out shoots, and decided where she should go next. He took credit for much of her image for quite a while, and Twiggy let him. Quote, "He was 10 years older and loud," she said. "I was quiet. It worked. Until it didn't." But for now, she was still at the center of the hurricane. Between 1966 and 1970, Twiggy appeared on over 90 magazine covers. Elle, Paris Match, 17, Look, Harper's Bazaar. In Japan, she was mobbed at airports. In Paris, girls copied her eyeliner. In LA, she appeared on The Ed Sullivan Show and made audiences gasp simply by standing still. And still, she didn't quite understand the fuss. "I didn't feel like a model," she said. "I felt like a kid who was dressed up and told to look at a camera." But that, somehow, was exactly what the world wanted. She was modern without trying, edgy without knowing, beautiful without saying so. She was the first model who looked like she'd never been taught how to be one, and that changed everything. Chapter 4. The Curtain, the Camera, and the Voice She Found. By the end of the 1960s, Twiggy wasn't just a model, she was a brand. Her face had become shorthand for an entire generation's style, and the industry knew it. There were Twiggy lashes, Twiggy dresses, Twiggy mannequins in department store windows. You could buy her makeup, wear her outfits, even own a Twiggy Barbie. She was packaged, licensed, copied, commodified, and all of that before the age of 20. In many ways, she was the first model not to be treated like a silent clothes hanger, but more as a full-blown cultural celebrity. Jean Shrimpton had made modeling modern. Twiggy made it mainstream. She wasn't just in the magazine. She was in bedrooms, on book bags, pinned to locker doors, and stitched into advertising budgets. She didn't create the celebrity model, but she became the prototype. For an entire generation of girls, Twiggy wasn't someone you admired from afar. She was someone you could be, or at least dress like. By the end of 1969, the fashion world was obsessed with Twiggy, but Twiggy was quietly bored of fashion. She had spent nearly 4 years being everyone's idea of a symbol, printed, packaged, posed. She had become the face of a decade that was now ending. The miniskirt had peaked, London was shifting. The once swinging scene felt more like a carousel that she couldn't get off. Quote, "You can't be a coat hanger for your entire life," she said, half joking when she announced her retirement from the modeling industry at age 20. It wasn't a publicity stunt, she meant it. Quote, "I was tired of it," she said later. "I didn't want to be photographed anymore. I wanted to move." And she did, literally. Her next chapter began with an unlikely figure, Ken Russell, the British film director, best known for his surreal, confrontational style. He had seen something in her that others hadn't, not just a face, but a presence. He cast her in The Boyfriend, a musical set in the 1920s. Twiggy, who had never acted professionally, accepted with nervous enthusiasm. Quote, "I'd never sung, never danced properly, and I'd never acted," she said. "It scared the life out of me." But she trained hard. She took tap lessons, vocal lessons, breathing classes. She watched old Hollywood musicals on repeat, studying how women like Ginger Rogers and Judy Garland moved not like models, but like storytellers. When filming began in 1970, she was ready even if she didn't feel it. The result was dazzling. The Boyfriend was released in 1971 and earned Twiggy a pair of Golden Globes, Best Newcomer and Best Actress in a Musical or Comedy. Critics were stunned. Audiences were charmed. She wasn't just a model who could act. She was a performer, funny and vulnerable and luminous on screen. The New York Times called her a natural. The Los Angeles Times said she outshines the film around her. It was a triumph and a turning point. Twiggy was no longer just a face. She had a voice now. She was no longer the girl being shaped by other people's vision. She was choosing her own. In the years that followed, she leaned into that freedom. She released music, much of it gently theatrical, part show tune, part confessional pop. Her 1976 single, Here I Go Again, charted in the UK, and her debut album was praised for its warmth and honesty. She also returned to the stage, starring in West End musicals like Cinderella and building a new identity as an entertainer, not an object. She was still instantly recognizable, but now she was recognized for more than just the way she looked. Her personal life was shifting too. In 1977, she married American director Michael Whitney, a relationship that felt like a reprieve from the manic pace of her early fame. The following year, she gave birth to their daughter Carly. Twiggy was nearly 30, a mother, and beginning to create a version of herself that existed entirely off camera. But it wouldn't stay quiet for long. Ken Russell, Tommy Tune, photographers, producers, they kept calling. She continued acting through the late 70s and 80s and even returned to Broadway in the 1983 musical My One and Only, a tap-dancing extravaganza that earned her a Tony nomination. She held her own opposite seasoned performers and was described as elegant, effortless, and real. No gimmick, no myth, just a woman who had lived 1,000 lives already and still was creating new ones. And yet, through it all, Twiggy never chased fame the way others did. Quote, "I never really liked the whole celebrity thing," she said in her 40s. "I always liked going home more than going out." Chapter 5. The Spotlight, the Silence, and the Woman Who Stepped Back. By the early 1980s, Twiggy had moved to Los Angeles with Michael and her daughter Carly. The city was sunnier than London, less cynical, more sprawling, and for a while it suited her. She worked when she wanted to, guest starring in films, releasing an album, designing small fashion lines. But most of her time was spent at home, swimming in the backyard, making school lunches, reading stories in bed. Quote, "Motherhood changed everything," she said later. "I finally felt like I belonged somewhere." But domestic life didn't always equal peace. Michael struggled with alcohol, and their marriage quietly strained under the pressure of old demons. In 1983, without warning, he died of a heart attack. Twiggy was 34, Carly just 5 years old. "I had to keep going," she said. "I had a little girl to raise." And so she did what she had always done. She adapted. She left Los Angeles and moved back to London and focused on stability. She accepted only work that felt right, voiceovers, fashion columns, the occasional stage appearance. She didn't need the attention. She needed time. And time eventually brought her Lee. Lee Lawson, an actor and director with a thoughtful manner and a soft voice, entered her life like a reprieve. They met through mutual friends in the late 80s, and within a year they were inseparable. He was calm, kind, and uninterested in Twiggy the icon. He loved Lesley, and that mattered. They got married in 1988 in a small private ceremony, blended their families, and moved into a quiet home in Suffolk, where the sounds were more likely to be birdsong and cattle hiss than paparazzi shutters. In public, Twiggy still shone. In 1983, she had earned a Tony nomination for her role in My One and Only, a Broadway musical that proved she could dance and sing with the best of them. In the 90s, she hosted Twiggy's People, a chat show that felt more like long conversations than interviews. Her guests weren't A-listers, they were people with stories, and Twiggy listened. But her most lasting reinvention came not through cameras or scripts, it came in form of clothes. In the early 2000s, Twiggy became the unlikely face of Marks & Spencer's fashion campaigns. Her image, older now but still unmistakably Twiggy, appeared on billboards across Britain, showing that style didn't have to belong to the young. Sales soared, and so did her influence. She wasn't pretending to be a teenager anymore. She was a grown woman with lines on her face and softness in her voice. She wore tailored jackets and flat shoes. She looked like someone you might sit next to on the train, if the woman beside you had once changed the way an entire generation dressed. She launched her own fashion lines, designed with comfort and confidence in mind. She supported charities. She wrote books. She never called it a comeback, because she had never really left. She had just simply moved to the side and waited for the world to catch up. In 2019, she was made a Dame Commander of the British Empire, not just for her modeling, but for her contributions to fashion, charity, and culture. And of course, she accepted it with grace. Quote, "It's the most beautiful honor," she said, "but I'm still just me, still Twig." She had gone from pin-up to powerhouse, from poster girl to quiet presence. Not many people manage that. Even fewer do it without once chasing the spotlight. But Twiggy never chased. She simply kept moving and let the light find her when it was ready. Chapter 6. The Legacy, the Quiet, and the Girl Who Grew Up. There's a strange thing that happens to women who become symbols too young. The world remembers them as a snapshot, frozen, fixed, uncomplicated. Twiggy for decades was remembered that way. The girl with the painted-on lashes, the tilted head, the collarbone-like shadows under skin. But she didn't stay that girl. She grew up, and more remarkably, she allowed herself to. By the 2020s, Twiggy was no longer in the spotlight center. She was where she had always preferred to be, a little off to the side. She lived quietly with her husband Lee in West London and Suffolk. She was a mother, a grandmother, a dog walker, a listener of radio. Her days were filled not with photo shoots, but with tea, books, and people she loved, and yet her legacy only deepened. In interviews, younger models still cite her. Designers refer to her instinctive minimalism. Makeup brands reissue her signature look, bold lashes, nude lips, mod precision. Museum retrospectives featured her photographs next to art and sculpture, treating her not as decoration, but as cultural artifact. She never staged a tell-all, never did a tabloid reinvention. She didn't need to. Her life spoke for itself. The girl who had once taken an hour and a half to do her eyelashes now wore them natural. Her face in its 70s was elegant, yes, but also human. There were lines now. She had earned them. She launched a podcast in 2020, tea with Twiggy, not to reinsert herself into celebrity, but to have gentle, honest conversations. She said she liked hearing people's stories, and for once, it felt like the world was ready to hear hers, too. Quote, "I was only a model for 4 years, from 1966 to 1970. People are always shocked by that. They think I was a model for decades," she once said in an interview. 4 years, and yet the impact stretched across decades. She didn't invent the idea of the model, or the trend, or the muse, but she did change the rules of what those words could mean. So that is it for today's video. That is it for the story of Lesley Lawson, the girl who became Twiggy. I really would love to know what you think. As said, I think Twiggy is a face everyone knows her name, but I don't think a lot of people are even aware of the fact that Twiggy isn't actually her name. I do really think that a lot of people only know her as a picture and don't know the person that she is. And she's such a wonderful person, such an incredible muse, and I truly mean it when I write and say that she inspired the way an entire generation dressed. She was the prototype of the mod girl, and she also in many ways was the prototype of a teen star. She was, alongside the Beatles, one of the first artists to be marketed in a way that was so intensely everywhere at such a young age. So yeah, I would love to know what you think about Twiggy. But now I know you're all here for the giveaway, so let me show you what I have. I'm giving away this little trio of my favorite eye makeup products that I use to create this look. Starting with the Essence 24 Ever Ink Liner in Intense Black. And don't you worry, I've not used any of these. I just picked them up at the drugstore. This is the eyeliner I like to use for the upper lash line eyeliner. Then, also by Essence, the Dip Eyeliner. This one is a little different because it has like a little tub down here and then you draw like this. This is what I like to use for the lower lashes. I find this to probably be the easiest way to do it. And then of course, and this has the most fitting name, this is my all-time favorite mascara. It's by a brand called Catrice, and it is the Glam & Doll Volume Waterproof Mascara. And is perfect. So if you want to win these 3 things, leave a comment down below and an email address so that I can reach you. I will draw all the winners on December 26th. You can enter every single day for every single giveaway, but just know that if you have been drawn for one and you get drawn for a second prize, I will throw your name back into the hat so that 25 prizes will go to 25 people. But yeah, that brings me to the end of this video. I really hope you enjoyed it. If you did, I would love you to give it a thumbs up and maybe even share it with a friend. It supports me, it supports the channel, and it would truly mean the world. If you like what you saw, consider subscribing. I have 11 more videos like this coming, and also a vlog every other day. So if you want to know more about me, my life, or these incredible muses, make sure to subscribe. I would love to have you around. I hope you have a beautiful day. Go out, enjoy. I was gonna say the sunshine, but hopefully the snow. It's December. Hopefully the snow. Take yourself some time to focus on you and your mental health today, and I will catch you in the next video. Bye, dolls. So tell me